Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. So I wanted to hopefully briefly cover this petition that I've seen promoted online regarding the game 6 Days in Fallujah, in particular the cancellation of said game. I just want to give my opinion on it. No camera today because it's late and I look more ratchet than normal. But anyway, I hope everybody is well. So, uh, I read through this petition, which I did not sign, and I just want to cover it, respond to it, and give my opinion. Now, I do believe that there is a little, I guess, sort of prequel that you need to know to understand this. Now, I will admit, I'm not exactly too versed on first person shooters, in particular, first person shooters that have to deal with real world conflicts. I know those are popular going back to the days of, like, Call of Duty and the World War II shooters that were really popular in the late 90s and late 2000s, but not really my type of video game. But from what I do understand, the controversy surrounding this game is that it takes place in Iraq in the city of Fallujah, and apparently is based on the real life conflict, and that its source material is the personal accounts of several civilians and soldiers and whatnot who were actually there. And apparently, at some point, the creators of the game stated it was a political game. Some people, the likes of Anita Sarkeesian, took issue with that. Then the developers of the game clarified their comments and said that it's more of a game that's exploring like the what really happened there. Right? It's more on the ground, boots on the ground type of video game where you play as a soldier that, regardless of how they personally feel about the politics of their country or the politics of the war, that they have to do what they're assigned to do, right? And now, of course, because of histrionic drivel like this change.org petition, the gaming industry is trying to get this game canceled for no other reason than, from what best I can tell from the bit of reading I've done on this, is that some people find this personally offensive, personally distasteful, right? So let me go over the actual petition, because that's what I really want to focus in on. There's a larger story, and there are better people who can tell it than I can, but I really want to focus in on this particular change.org petition, right? So it shows the image of the official trailer for the 6 Days in Fallujah. And as you can see, at the time that I took the screenshot of this image, 3,954 have signed, and they're trying to get it to 5,000, right? So nearly 4,000 people have already signed this petition. 4,000 people have put their signature down to, or nearly, I should say, nearly 4,000 people have put their signature down to get this game pulled for no other reason than they find it personally offensive for some reason. But anyway, let's get into it. So we have the image here, right? And then we have this says Victoria and Highwire Games. Excuse me. Victoria and Highwire Games just announced the 2021 release, a horrific video game called 6 Days in Fallujah that promotes the mass murder of Iraqis by American invaders. Hey, I have no say over U.S. foreign policy. I have disagreed with a lot of it. That much I will say, but I do believe it is a bit too out of my wheelhouse, and certainly a much more complex issue that cannot be discussed in a video game, at least in any meaningful manner. And I don't think that labeling this, the mass murder of Iraqis by American invaders, you kind of already show, sort of how you feel about this. Obviously, not taking a nuanced stand, but whatever. Politics are incredibly emotional, and many people don't like nuance in their politics. But anyway, To add insult to injury, a demo of the game was circulated on the 18th anniversary of the Iraq War, an illegal invasion and occupation by US forces and their allies. This was an international war crime. Uh, it's war. Plenty of countries, including Iraq, are guilty of war crimes. What is your point? But anyway, it says this was an international war crime that included the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and the displacement even more. Bombing, shooting, and humiliating the Iraqi people is being normalized in this sick video game, which will also inevitably breed a new generation of mass shooters in America and brainwash gamers into thinking racism is okay. Okay, do you know how much bombing and shooting has existed in video games? Hell, you can use bombs in the very first Zelda game to blow up walls and try to get around. And how do you know? Have you played this game yet? Have you actually sat down and played this game? How do you know that this is about bombing, shooting, and humiliating the Iraqi people? That sounds like one hell of a reach. Just because you disagree with American foreign policy as regards the Iraq War and view the U.S. as foreign invaders, and you are totally within your rights to feel that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the game is going to be about. It also says that it will inevitably breed a new generation of mass shooters in America. You know what breeds mass shootings in America? Violence in America. You know what breeds violence in America? Broken homes, poverty, feelings of hopelessness, mental issues such as depression, and homicidal urges, and people being so broken inside that they decide to express their hurt and anger and rage in an outward way instead of in an inward way. Because, see, when a person feels that low and they turn it inward, generally they commit suicide. When a person feels that low and they turn it outward, you get mass shootings. And the two that have happened recently are far from the first, are far from the last. And my heart goes out to all of the victims and the people that they left behind in those two shootings. 16 people are dead for absolutely no reason. And everybody wants to point fingers except at the killers and at the societal issues that cause, or rather create the opportunity, let's say, for these types of things to happen. But yes, a video game that hasn't even been released yet, that's what's going to do it. I mean, it's not as if we haven't had games like Doom and Duke Nukem and the various shooters that have existed since I was a little girl in the 1990s, yet the majority of video gamers don't run around shooting people up with pistols. It's kind of like we know that it's a fantasy, and we know quite literally when to turn it off. And this thing about brainwashing gamers into thinking racism is okay. First of all, gaming is incredibly diverse, has always been. The majority of maybe not the majority anymore, it's probably an unfair thing to say. But some of the biggest companies and biggest franchises come from Japan. Japan! So how are you going to argue that, I'm assuming you mean American gamers here, because gaming is an international pastime these days. So how in the world are you going to assume that every gamer in America growing up today is going to be brainwashed into thinking racism is okay? Now, am I surprised that this argument's being made? No. What was it, Extra Point or whatever, tried to make a similar argument last year or the year prior, and I responded to that video, bringing up the fact that just because you play as a bad guy doesn't mean you literally become the bad guy in real life, right? That argument that Extra Points or Extra Credits or whatever the hell it was called made was dumb then, it's dumb now. You have no conclusive proof that video games brainwash gamers, brainwash in a diverse set. Because guess what? Even in America, gamers are pretty diverse. Male dominated, sure, but still, the amount of people who play video games by age and by race is very diverse. And yet you're claiming it's going to brainwash the current and upcoming generations of gamers into thinking racism is okay. You know what's going to brainwash them into thinking racism is okay? College is going to brainwash them into thinking racism is okay. That's what's going to brainwash them. The education system. Their parents are going to brainwash them. A lot of things are going to brainwash them, but I doubt a video game is going to be it. Okay, but let's continue. An excerpt from an article on the demo of the game. Okay, excerpt from an article. We're not told the name of the article. We're not told who wrote it. Just an excerpt from the article. Keep in mind, I'm covering this whole petition, but they can't even, it's just an excerpt from the article. It says, the video focuses on the SWAT tactics you'll use to break into people's homes and clear them of enemies. Okay, your point, plenty of video games have you going around clearing areas and taking out the enemy. Have you ever played Metal Gear Solid? What do you think you have to do on every level? So what is your point? It highlights how layouts will constantly change to capture the feeling of not knowing what you'll find every time you step into a new room. I know that feeling. It's called Metal Gear Solid. The gameplay ends with the player busting into a room where a family of 4 hides in the corner hoping to not get murdered. Okay, that's probably going to be a cutscene of some sort, which means that either it's going to play out and show a certain outcome, or given that video games are interactive, it might give you a choice. Do you save the family or do you hurt them? Right? Choice has always been a big thing in video games, and modern video games, right, like to give you choices. So all you're saying here is that it ends with the player busting into a room where a family of 4 hides. What if the player is the hero and the player is there to save this family? What if someone in that family is actually, a criminal, and you have to figure out a way, or a bad guy of some sort, and you have to figure out a way to, get the bad person out of there without hurting anyone else? There are a lot of different gameplay elements you can play with in this scenario. So again, what is your point? Do you know how many gameplay sequences end with the player character busting into a room and then something happens, or someone hides, or someone runs, or whatever it is? It's a gameplay sequence. Don't you think you should at least see how the whole scene plays out? Or at least tell us how the whole scene plays out? The video then cuts to real-life documentary footage as a resident of Fallujah explains that their dad refused to leave the city during the assault. Okay? What does that have to do? All right, was their father like in this gameplay scene? Is he one of the people referenced? Is he one of the 4 in the room? Like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm hoping the father is okay. But what does that have to do with a thing? We're talking about a gameplay scenario. Like what does this documentary footage about the dad refusing to leave the city tell me about the game, other than that this real life person was either very brave or very foolish to stay in a city during the assault? I don't know his story, so I'm not going to judge, but again, like, what does this tell me? What does this tell me? That doesn't tell me anything. Relating to the game doesn't tell me anything. Then it says, please sign and forward to everyone you know. Hell no. Together we can stop this madness. Oh no, we can't. Because people don't want it to stop. Oh dear sir, we are all mad here. But anyway, it says, war is not normal. I hate to break it to you, Chief, but war is the most normal thing people do. We are by nature warriors and warmongers. War has always existed. So long as people figured out how to hurt each other, there has been war. There's all different types of war: international conflicts, local conflicts. There's the war inside yourself. There's the war at home. There's there's the war at work. Everything is war if you want to look at it that way. War is actually too normal. That's the problem. Video games that dehumanize brown people are not okay. I would agree, except that you haven't proven where this or any other video game has dehumanized brown people. You don't give any proof, any content, any context. You just say video games that dehumanize brown people. But what about video games that dehumanize Asian people, or white people, or Hispanic people, or animals, or aliens? Okay, what about that? What about that? What about video games that engage in dehumanization? What about video games that dehumanize men? How many times are men in video games used as cannon fodder, right? Or as the default no personality having bad guy? Ever hear the phrase "dude is disposable"? Ever wonder where that comes from? Right? The beautiful princess gets saved, right? But who has to rescue her, right? The brave knight in overalls has to go and rescue her. You ever think about how that might be dehumanizing to some men? But no, we don't think about that because we have an agenda. An agenda, we cannot actually have an agenda that deals in truth and nuance. Right? We can't have that. We must market on emotion. We don't have to prove what we say. We just have to say it. Hurrah! Anyway, it says American game developers have been creating sick games like this since the first Gulf War in Iraq in the 1990s. Can you name one? Name one. Name one video game from the 1990s that was a shooter that took place in the Gulf War in the 1990s. Now, look, I haven't played every single game made in America from that time period, but I remember a lot of the games that I played back then, a lot of the games that I heard about because I was following video games very closely. I was reading magazines like GamePro, so I remember games like Castle of Wolfenstein, and I remember games like Doom and Duke Nukem. So those games you could argue normalized killing Nazi wolf monster animal things, and they normalize things like killing hell demons, or cheesy phrases like "Hail to the king, baby." Right? Maybe they normalize stuff like that. I remember games that were very controversial for their violent content. Not just stuff like Mortal Kombat and stuff that I grew up with and played, but I mean games like there was a game I think around 95 or 96 that was called Postal. And you played as a nutcase, right? And you shot people up, more or less, right? And people didn't like the fact that it was called postal, right? Because you had the phrase going postal, which meant to go crazy and commit a mass shooting, because there had been, at that time, mass shootings in post offices. So people didn't like the name of the game. And being older now, I can understand that. It's certainly not a game that I was ever interested in. I found it kind of pointless even as a kid. But still, that game had a right to exist. It also had a right to fail. It's not as if it had a sequel or anything. But offensive things have a right to exist. You have a right to not engage with them. You have a right to disagree with them. But they have a right to exist. Right, so again, show me a video game that was set in the 1990s in the Gulf War, or that came out during that time. Would have been the early 1990s, that normalized the killing of Iraqis back then. I would have said that probably the news probably contributed more to the normalization of violence than a video game ever has, but that's just me. And then it says, normalizing the killing of Iraqis for the next round, this has to stop. I agree this has to stop, but guess what? The only way to stop it is for politicians to do their job, is for people to come together again as a society and to build strong homes and to have good jobs and, safe places to live and stuff that is just well beyond a video game to solve. These issues, really, in my opinion, cannot be solved by anything outside of perhaps divine intervention. And only Lord knows when that's going to happen. But until then, yelling at video games, whether you're a rep in Chicago trying to get GTA and every type of violent video game banned, or whether it's this petition to get one particular game taken away, guess what? Video games are that big scary thing that's easy to blame all of society's issues on, so you don't have to deal with the fact that, hey, society's issues are a lot more complex and a lot more beyond what people can do than we want to admit. But we have to look like we're doing something. So let's point at this big scary thing. Let's demonize, not just dehumanize, but let's demonize video games and gamers, right? And make them look bad, or worse, act as if we are attacking their pastime for their own good. We just don't want a generation of gamers to grow up and be mass killers. Except the majority of mass shooters have not been shown to play video games, right? The only thing they had was what the Columbine boys, and even they didn't play video games as much as people made it out to seem like they did, right? So again, stop trying to stop making video games the boogeyman and actually try to address the real world issues, if you can, that cause the terrible things that you claim you are trying to stop. But let's be honest, people don't, or at least people who make these type of statements, and especially politicians, don't want this to stop. It has to keep going, because if they solve the problem, well then, what the hell do you need them for? Right? But anyway, that's the petition itself. I think the only thing left is some very, choice links, let's say. Some choice links to Kotaku and IGN and IGN, right? That the person wants you to check out. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? So I actually found out a bit more about this by reading some articles on Bounding into Comics. So what happens is, Bounding into Comics reports that Jennifer Hale, right, who's pretty much been in everything, right, a well-known, prolific voice actress. She's been FemShep in Mass Effect. She was Dr. Naomi Hunter in Metal Gear. She was the voice of Black Cat in the old Spider-Man cartoon. Basically, if there's a TV show, cartoon that's ever been on American TV, she's probably had her voice in it in some fashion, right? But they said the Bounding into Comics article, which is linked, of course, all of this is linked, stated that she had signed this petition. So I was like really shocked. I'm like, why would she do that given her voice work in that her most famous role, or at least one of her most famous roles in recent years, is as a space marine. That has you going shooting up various types of alien races in Mass Effect. Basically, in Mass Effect, you're either shooting the various infamous the various alien races, or you are sleeping with most of them. That's pretty much how Mass Effect works, and they put this big epic story in between. But mostly, it's either you're either sleeping with one of the aliens or you're shooting them. This is pretty much how the game works, right? But anyway, so I'm like, why would she sign this? So I go to her Twitter. Now, I didn't tweet at her. I tweeted about her, but I didn't tweet at her. So I go to her Twitter, and I can't find the actual tweet. And I'm like, well, Bounding into Comics, they typically don't lie. They're a pretty reliable source. Why can't I find this? But I did find proof that she did retweet this as it says right there. I know it might be kind of blurry, and I apologize, but she did retweet it. So I go to the archive link that was provided in the Bounding into Comics article. So at the top of the archive link, it shows the original Twitter link, right? So I copy the Twitter link, put it in a different tab, and guess what I get when I click through? Sorry, that page does not exist. Jennifer Hale most likely deleted that post. It probably got a lot of pushback because, again, of the hypocrisy of her, of all people, signing such a petition, and probably at some point she deleted it. Again, I didn't even hear about this until a few minutes, well, not a few minutes, but like relatively recently, hence why I made the video. But this is what we have here, right? Prominent voice actress in video games and anime, right? Someone who's definitely going to have clout and pull, and whose opinion's going to matter at least a little bit in the minds of gamers and in the gaming community. And she signs this petition and then is not woman enough, right? Doesn't have the stones or the ovaries or the quads or whatever you want to call it to actually keep the post up, most likely. Right? Most likely, the reason why it says the page doesn't exist is because she deleted it. So she's willing to sign it, but she's not willing to keep the proof that she signed it. And as I said here, Hale also, did she forget that she voices a freaking space marine? I am so damn tired of the cowardice and the hypocrisy in people in the entertainment industry. Because it's not just her, Steve Bloom, it's many other people. Right? The people who give voice to some of the toughest characters that you end up, admiring, and then the actual person is just a big coward, right? Now I know they say, don't meet your heroes and all that, and that's very true and everything, but still, it is a bit disheartening, right? Perhaps it's an unfair expectation to expect a person who voices a character to embody some of the qualities of that character. But still, it is a bit disheartening to know that the woman who voices a character who, especially in Mass Effect 3, can go from just renegade and being an anti-hero to just flat out evil, is going to sign a petition to cancel a game that, features violence in the Middle East? As if there isn't real world violence in the Middle East, right? That features military operations like a Mass Effect, which is a space marine space opera where you go on missions for the military. Like, what? It's just insane. It's just insane. Like I said, we're all mad here, right? So here's what I quote tweeted when I came across this petition earlier today while I was working. I have been quite the busy New Yorker this week. So here's what I wrote. Please stop being hysterical. I hate to break it to you, but war and conflict has existed since the birth of mankind. And I don't mean Mick Foley. Although Mrs. Foley's baby boy is a big old bear most of the time. He just likes to get hurt. A lot. There is no proof that video games cause racism or violence. You have no proof, so you make baseless claims. I will not sign this petition. I have looked over quite a few articles and studies, at least the ones that are written in a way I can understand them. And the only link, if anything, that has been found is that video games, in particular if you're playing a fighting game or anything particularly competitive or violent, right, can make you aggressive for a few minutes afterwards, right? There's this like window of about 15 minutes from what I've read. And I've linked the articles in the description as well, that demonstrate that for about 15 minutes, you're going to be a bit more aggressive. And yeah, I can attest to that. I have played many a fighting game and been mad as hell after I've lost to the final boss for like the 10th time in a row when I want to chuck the controller. It's like, anyone comes near me. So yeah, but just because you have an aggressive feeling in the moment does not mean that you're going to go on and enact that on other people in the world. And here's what really bugs me and frustrates me. All this talk about video games. We've seen this 1,000 times. They did it with TV when TV was young. They did it with radio. They did it with comic books, the seduction of the innocent, and the Comics Code Authority, and the Hayes Code, and all this other stuff. They did it with music, in particular rock music, in the '80s, right? And all of that stuff. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that it's wrong to not want to support things you don't like or find distasteful. That's fine. My issue is not with this person who made this petition not liking the game or not liking U.S. foreign policy in Iraq. That's not liking something is perfectly valid. I don't like Resident Evil. I don't like smoking. Right? I don't like those things. But there's a difference between I don't like this, so I personally am not going to support it. And then there is I don't like this, it offends me, so I must get rid of it by making some claim of think of the children, think of the women, think of the future, right? How does a song by like Whitney Houston go, right? I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and yada yada yada, right? Greatest greatest love of all, right? This is not how you teach the children, right? This is not how you help them in any substantial way. Should you be mindful of what they take in? Yes, of course. If you think something is too violent, too graphic, too sexual, or whatever it is, you as a parent, as a caregiver, as a teacher, whatever it is, have every right to say, no, you are not watching that. What you don't have the right to do is go on a Twitter campaign going, we must sign this petition and get this pulled because I am offended. I am offended that you are offended. Stop. Right? So that's like, again, it's just more foolishness. But what shocks me, is the support that it gets and that it continues to get. I guess the old saying is true that things have to get worse before they get better, because the fact that this type of thing is no longer laughed off laughed off the face of the internet, right, is amazing to me. That someone like Jennifer Hale would support this, and other people in gaming, but she's the biggest name in my opinion, would support this and sign it is amazing to me. That nearly 4,000 people would support this and sign this is amazing to me. What's also amazing to me is that no one complains about or at least calls for online petitions to end things like MMA or boxing or football, actual real world sports that result in real world injuries. And in the case of boxing and football, result in real world injuries that can cause death, right? And can cause injuries like CTE, which can only be diagnosed after the person has died, right? And CTE can cause sudden and drastic changes in behavior. There have been several football players. I think one of them was Jovan Belcher or something, right? Who I think he killed his girlfriend a few years ago. I think he killed his girlfriend or something. Later took his own life, and they found later that he had, or most likely had, CTE, right? I would think that if you care about the safety of your children, you would be mindful to not let them get involved in those type of sports, which can do real, literal brain damage. It can cause them to be violent and aggressive in very dangerous ways. But I guess I'm wrong. I'm guessing that it's actually the video game that's the problem here, although there are different types of video games you can let people play. But apparently, it's the shooter, it's Mortal Kombat, it's GTA, right? It's the big, bad, scary, M-rated games that kids shouldn't be playing anyway that are the problem here. That's what's bringing America down. Not bad policy, not divisive rhetoric. Video games. That's the answer. Attack the video games, and we will solve all the world's issues, and we shall know peace in hell. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.